Well, I'm sure at this point you're expecting me to say, out of these two sides, which one's more complicated? And that's the right side, so we should start with the right side. And that idea works most of the time. But here's an example where it actually wouldn't work out. If you start with the right side, and I even have a little scratch paper right here, because I'm going to show you that it actually doesn't work out very well if you start with the right side. So you would use a trig identity for sine of 2x. And then the top would look like 1 minus 2 times sine of x times cosine of x. And on the bottom, use a trig identity for cosine of 2x, like cosine squared x minus sine squared x. And then take a look at this. With the top, I can't factor it. There's not really anything I can do. And I'm supposed to get tangent out of this, and I don't see how I can get tangent. So, when you get stuck, try something else. So I'm actually going to start with the left-hand side. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to rewrite tangent as sine over cosine. So the numerator will look like 1 minus sine x over cosine x. The bottom, 1 plus sine x over cosine x. Part of the reason that I like that is now there's this common denominator of cosine x. And this whole thing is a complex fraction, which I can simplify if I multiply the top and the bottom by cosine of x. So when I distribute, there's going to be cosine times 1. So that's cosine of x minus, when I distribute this to this fraction, the cosines are going to cancel, so it leaves just minus sine x. And then on the bottom, it's going to basically be the same thing, except it's got a plus in between. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the conjugate. So for cosine of x plus sine x, its conjugate is cosine of x minus sine x. Now this isn't something that you would automatically think to do from the beginning of this problem, but that's part of the reason for watching these podcasts, is so you see me do it, and then in the back of your brain you'll always have, oh, maybe we should try the conjugate. So multiply by the conjugate, which is cosine of x minus sine x, and you need to multiply the top and the bottom by the same thing. And I realize it's starting to look like it's going to be a mess, but believe me, it's going to work out. So on the top we would have cosine times cosine, so that's cosine squared. Then there would be a cosine times a negative sine. And also, when you multiply these two, there's another cosine times negative sine. So that means there's actually two of them that are negative sine of x times cosine of x. And then there would be the negative sine times negative sine. So that's positive sine squared. On the bottom, because they're the conjugate, you only need the first one times the first one, so that's cosine squared. The middle terms would be cosine times negative sine, and also cosine times positive sine. They will cancel. Then the last term would be this sine times this negative sine, so negative sine squared. And then that right there was that trig identity that I was talking about at the beginning of this problem. So that means that the bottom is cosine of 2x. And on the top, I've got cosine squared plus sine squared. When you put those two together, that's a 1. Then just recopy this part. And we are done. Because the bottom is already finished, cosine of 2x, And then this 2 times sine x times cosine x, that's the trig identity for sine of 2x. So, believe it or not, it actually worked out. Perseverance pays off.